Excellent. Hello and assalamu alaikum, everyone. Tonight, we have a very special guest joining me here today, someone that I call a dear friend, a fellow alum from MIT, also a VC, and the one with the coolest glasses in all of the venture capital world. And thank you for joining us today, Bilal. A pleasure and an honor to have you here.
It's awesome to be here, Abil. My gosh, I was just thinking how long we've known each other, and it's been very long. We both have white in our beards now, so it's been a while.
Absolutely. I just look at my hair and it's all gone gray, but as long as I have some, I think I shouldn't complain.
That's true. Same here.
I presume you're dialing in from, excuse me, Palo Alto?
I'm in Menlo Park, right off of Sand Hill Road. So, this is home now. I was in Boston, as you know, for 15, 16 years and moved to the West Coast about 10 years ago. Okay.
That's all something we're hopefully going to cover on this chat tonight. But I think I want to start really from the beginning and the place where I'm dialing in from right now, your hometown, Karachi. So maybe just to kind of get people a little more familiar with who Bilal Zuberi is, the person behind that VC, where it all started, the journey to the US, if you want to share something.
Great. Bilal Zuberi is from the Zuberi family. And as they say, there's a Zuberi, every rock you pick up underneath it. But it's a family that's originally from India and UP, came to Pakistan. My mother was actually born in Karachi. Father was in the Navy, and an officer there. And then my father actually was born and grew up in India. He moved later and married my mother. I grew up in Karachi. I went to St. Patrick's High School in Sadr. I am from what I consider to be middle class in Pakistan, and by US standards, maybe lower middle class, taking the school buses and taking mini buses to school when I grew up. And then happened to be decently good at studies and got good grades in O levels and A levels, and applied in a lot of different places for college. Got a full scholarship to go to a college in Ohio. I did my undergrad there. Learned there that grad school in the US is actually paid for by agencies like NIH and NSF, the National Science Foundation and whatnot. And that was like, wait, I can actually afford grad school and I don't have to immediately start working. In fact, they pay you to do grad studies. So that enabled me to go to grad school. I went to MIT, worked under a Nobel laureate, Professor Mario Molina, who worked on physical chemistry, especially around cloud formation in ultraviolet rays destruction, chlorofluorocarbons, environmental sciences, and then global warming. I did my PhD in chemistry and then started a business that was advanced materials for environmental emissions control and catalytic applications, and built that business up for 4.5 years. Corning became the acquirer of that part of the business, and then I became a VC now almost 15 years ago. So a lot of scars on my back now from building companies, starting companies, and obviously investing in companies.
I'm sure that must have shaped a lot of what you do right now. But maybe I want to pick on something slightly different. How much of that upbringing, how much of that grit that you had to develop, presumably in Pakistan, shaped you through that educational and early work experience?
You had a lot. So,
number
one, it is not lost on me ever that I am one of, 200 plus million people in Pakistan. There is nothing so remarkably special about my upbringing that's different than anybody else who was around me, right? A lot of people went to the same schools, their parents were hardworking. We were all, given the same kind of discipline and the same kind of opportunities. I do consider myself to be lucky. And I do believe in religion, and I do believe that the du'as of people who care for me have helped me. But as far as the grit is concerned, look, there was always this fire inside me that you have to accomplish something in life. What is this going to be? Now, when I was growing up in Pakistan, it was, more simpler things. It was like, getting a job and having something that's worth something, improving the livelihoods of yourself and family around you. I remember distinctly after leaving MIT, I got a job at BCG. It's a high-paying job. Relative to having just come out of school, and then deciding that I want to start a company, and it was a big risk on starting a company. And two things always stuck with me and helped me make that decision. One was that I did not get all these opportunities along the way in life to just be happy with what's good for me. So I have to do something that scales and has some level of impact on something broader than me, whether it's my family, whether it's my friends, whether it's my city, whether it's my country, whether it's my countries, whether it's the world, have an impact at some scale. And I felt like just having a job wouldn't do that for me. And then the second thing was something that my mom always said, there's nothing that you cannot do if you just put your mind to it, right? And for a mother to say that to a kid who's growing up among other people who are very rich and you're not, I couldn't even afford my own bat, to play cricket on the streets. For a mother to say that is a very powerful thing. And I think that stuck with me. Why not? And if I'm not going to do that now, why not? So I think that allowed me to take risks and risk, there's no real reward in life without risk. And, if parents can do one thing, and that's what I try to do with my kids, if parents can do one thing with their children, is to somehow prepare them to take more risks in life. That's the only way we push the frontiers of human existence. And that is something that, somehow my parents were able to instill in me. Probably my dad suffered for it, right? Like he was an entrepreneur himself, and, you have businesses that do well and then they shut down and then you don't have an earning and there's no stable earning, right? Like there's no salary at the end of the month. You have to kind of make your own living. But I think what that enabled him to do was to instill that it's okay to take risks in life. And it was okay for him to send a 16, 17-year-old kid thousands of miles away where he didn't know, how much more before, this kid will ever come back, or will he ever come back, to have spent most of his life away from me. I think those are all risks that he's taken to enable him to have an impact and through me to have an impact. And I think that's all we're all trying to do with our kids, right? We're trying to help them be better, but also not just to live off, the fruits of our labor, but to create their own fruits for the future generations.
Very valuable messages in there, and it's increasingly becoming clear for the audience, and I've known this for a while, that you're very values driven and principles driven approach to life. Did you face tough decisions in that journey, trade-offs? For example, the same parents that helped encourage you, send you abroad, was there consideration to have to think about moving back, them getting older, maybe if you're the elder sibling, have additional responsibilities? How did you put a framework around that? How did you make decisions as to continue to work towards your drive and fulfill some of those ambitions that you have, but at the same time stay true to all those values?
So, Rabil, all my problems in life, I really try to say that to myself and my family, are first world problems, right? So everything we're going to talk about, the things I worry about, these are all first world problems. People have much more difficult, much more basic, much more important problems. But, I do feel like, to accomplish what I've accomplished so far, my entire family has sacrificed. I can probably count the total number of days that I have spent with my family since I left home in 1995, right? You go home for a week, you go home for 2 weeks. Maybe, right? And that's not easy. I think about it every time I don't get to speak in Urdu, right? Like I'm the guy who would be listening to ghazal and nazme and going to qawwalis, right? And you and I even are having this conversation in English, right? And you miss that. You miss that growing up in Karachi and having Muin Akhtar and Umar Sharif and those jokes and that language. And that's not my life now. I miss the food. Right? You go to a restaurant and they have one dish that's good and you're like, oh my God, this is such an amazing restaurant. And you forget that this is every day, every night in Pakistan. So you give up on those things. But, at the end of the day, I do also feel that, the existence in this world is more fulfilling if you're constantly pushing the edge. if you're not just living a satisfied life, but you earn satisfaction by being dissatisfied with life and trying to accomplish more. Now, for different people, it's different things. Some people are very money driven. Some people are, very mission driven. And for some people, it's very emotions and ethics and so on. For me, it is, I have been given a lot of opportunity. What can I do with it? I can, how can I create opportunities for other people? How can I create a scalable infrastructure around myself? That's what drove me into investing, that I did a startup. I said, I now know how to do 0 to 1. I enjoy that. I love the idea of not knowing what comes next and working through that, a sausage making process of an early stage startup. And I said, I can do that again. But I said, well, what if I was to do that 4 or 5 times simultaneously? How would I do that? And, VC is one way of doing that, not the only way of doing that, but that's one way of doing that. So I think that, to me, scalability became sort of the mantra in my life. And I think it's very rewarding. It's very rewarding because you start to see a multiplication factor, right? Like early days in my life, everything was additional. You have 4 years of study, and then another 4 years of study, and then you have 4 years of job, and then you have a house, and then you have a car and a dog and the whole thing, right? At some point, you start to see a multiplication factor where the net reward that you're getting doesn't add much more to your life, but you feel like it's really accumulating and it's compounding and adding to other people's lives. And I think, not to get too philosophical about it, but that's how great startups work. Great startups are not about linear growth. It's about non-linear exponential growth. It's finding those outliers in life. And I think what life has afforded me now, and what my work has afforded me, is look for those non-linear growth vectors, look for those things that are, that give me the privilege of doing things that I wouldn't otherwise be able to do.
And the switch from being an entrepreneur to a VC, like how smooth or natural was it? Like, I presume, like, when you're an entrepreneur, you, like, for that company, and so you have some element of control, like, that your decisions are going to impact directly, like, a lot of people, which of course can also happen in VC. But was it natural for you? Was like, the entrepreneurial period in between really prepping you for what was your calling from the beginning, to be a VC?
I don't know if VC was my calling. I don't know if I'm good at it. We'll find out. The one thing about VC is you live in 10-year cycles. So, I've had good successes, but who knows? There's still, as famous Robert Frost poem, right? Like, I have miles to go before I sleep, even though woods are lovely, dark and deep. Doing a startup does prepare you a lot. Most importantly, to go from ideation, where this is an interesting idea, to making the gut decision that I am going to actually commit to this idea, right? Like, time is my only most important commodity. And to say I'm going to devote the next several years of my life to this is an important step. I did that with my time, with my startup. I do that with my money now. Then hiring people, right? Like, the first person I ever hired into my company, I couldn't sleep that night. He had a wife who needed medical care. I did not have enough money to provide medical care, but he was trusting me because he believed in me and he wanted to join me. And I almost was like, I don't know if you should join me, man. Like, I don't know if I can, what if I don't have any money in 6 months? But, you to hire people that really are, you're building your team, your band of brothers to go and figure something out. And then I had to fire some people, right? Again, some people had to fire because they weren't good, but some people had to fire because I couldn't afford them anymore, right? So you go through these cycles, and then you have product, and then you have sales, and then to put yourself out there and say, why don't you see what I see? That's not good enough. You have to tell them and put them in the position where they can see the value that's in it for their business. That kind of sales teaches you how to become a good salesperson in life broadly, not just for that particular product. And then to sell the company, to sell, I'm not just selling your product, but actually you need to buy my vision and make it yours. To go through that process was really interesting. And I think when I went into VC, the only thing that really did surprise me was having, being a VC and being on a board of a startup is like having kids. You want them to do everything right. You want them to be better than you, right? But you can't make them. right? You can only give them advice, guide them, maybe punish them a little bit, but eventually they're going to have to grow up to be their own. They're not little bonsai trees that are like smaller versions of yourself. So as much as I would like my CEOs to deliver the message and the narrative a certain way, sometimes you and I both probably feel like, man, if I was doing this, I would do it so much better. I wish I would go pitch this company to the investor instead of you. Like, oh, why can't you see it that this guy sucks? You need to fire him and get a new salesperson, right? But we can't make those decisions for them. We are on the governing body. Our job is like a parent. You don't make the decision for your child what course they should take in college. You can guide them, advise them, but if you push them to do physics or chemistry versus sociology or whatever they might want to do, you're going to screw up their lives. So don't do that. They have earned the right to make their own mistakes, and understanding that and then using that as tools to guide people into better successes is amazing. And I think, we deal with this every day as parents, and it's the same way of dealing with, CEOs and founders in businesses we invest in.
So just maybe double clicking on you as a VC now, and just wanting to understand, can you define an approach that you have? Is it, again, just to throw a couple of examples out there, are you more gut driven? Is it data? And then not just at the time of making an investment decision, but also then post that, what is the approach that you want to employ? Are you empathetic? Are you wanting to lead by example, or leveraging your experience? Is there a definition for this for anyone? And if for you, what is it?
It has evolved over time. I think I was more technology and product driven in early days of myself as a VC. And I think as all VCs, as they age and over time figure out that it's all about the people. I've fallen into the same zone where my investments tend to be very people driven. I invest in people that I believe are trying to accomplish something larger than life. Technology is a vector that they've used because that's a tool they have, they own, and they can muster. That doesn't have to be the only way. I tend to like ideas that can be reinvented many times over along the way. No large company exists today, well, with few exceptions, where there was one thing and one thing alone, and that just made them large. Organizations had to reinvent themselves. Facebook would have died a bad death if they hadn't reinvented themselves for mobile. And I think they're going through another reinvention today, and who knows where they'll be in 5 years, but certainly they wouldn't be where they are now, right? Look at Stripe, you look at Uber. So these organizations have to change, and you want to invest behind people that have that capacity to change, which is why you don't invest in somebody who's just done one thing for 25 years. They're an important part of the mix. They may be the chief technology officer or the chief scientist or something, but the founder has to be somebody who really sees this as a massive movement in society that they're trying to bring about. And they are, going to be willing to switch vectors as needed along the way to build the largest company possible. There are 5 things that usually are high level important in an investment. The first is team. Is this a person that you want to work with? Is this a person that you look up to? Is this a person I want to work for if I wasn't a VC? Is this a person I often end up telling people, man, one day I'll end up working for this person, right? Even though I'm investing it, and some people say VCs are working for this. You really do feel like, man, one day this guy's gonna be way more successful than I have ever become. And I have the humility to accept it on day one of a startup, even though it's a seed stage company. The second is technology and product. Like, is this really solving a problem? And do you really have something that you can own? Or is it like a commodity thing that, opening up a next Indian restaurant is probably not VC business, even though it's very hard to do. The third thing is the capital. How much capital will this take? Is this doable in VC returns profile, right? The fourth thing is, can you scale? Like, does this become big? And this depends on the size of the fund, right? What is big for a $50 million fund is very different for my fund, which is a $1.5 billion fund, right? So you have to make that judgment call based on, When I was early on doing investments, if you told me I would have companies that would exit for $100-200 million, I'd be ecstatic. Now, when I'm making an investment, I think about, can this ever be worth $10 billion? And so that matters. And then the last is, if you build it, will you be rewarded for it? And that has to do with the idea of exit multiples and what kind of businesses are VC businesses and which kinds are not. McKinsey is an amazing company, but it's a consulting company. If one partner leaves, basically that revenue goes away. And obviously that's not the case for companies like Databricks or whatever. So, you want to build businesses that will be rewarded if you build it because people believe in the longevity of it. So those are the kinds of things that go through my mind. Now, young VCs may have checklists or whatnot. When you've done it long enough, it starts to become embedded in you. Like it's almost this gut feeling you get when you meet somebody. You feel butterflies in your stomach and you're like, man, something's here. And you almost start asking, if you're a good VC, you start asking a question to yourself, why should I not invest in him? Every bone of my body says I should invest, but a good investor would then stop and say, let me ask myself why I should not invest in this business and go through that process to then make a skeptical but conviction-based bet.
Excellent. Tremendous learnings for all of us in there. And again, I just want to continue on the same kind of stream of thought, which is, so a number of characteristics that you look at for investments, but how did the leaning towards deep tech come about? Was like, your PhD and like, delving deeper into like, particular topics, or was this a function of like, joining Lux and again, their focus on deep tech? But maybe for the benefit of the listeners or the audience, how do you even define deep tech? Again, like, we have a lot of people from Pakistan. Pakistan probably doesn't have the same kind of like, traction of deep tech opportunities. So it'd be beneficial for everyone to learn a little bit.
Yeah, so there's tech and then technology. Okay, so tech, we all know tech is software or whatever, but I like the technology part of that whole thing. I like to invest at the intersection of technology and sciences. I think humanity moves forward because we discover new things, invent new things, and build new things. We allow ourselves to see ourselves better than we currently are. So a lot of things in life that VCs invest in is to sort of provide something for our life today, some comfort in our life today. We want entertainment, or we want to be able to communicate better or whatever, but that is our life today, right? I'm doing a video communication with you. There's some degree of latency in it. I can improve that and that'd be good. But what if I was to imagine something different? Like, what if it felt like I could hug you? What if it felt like I could shake hands with you? Now, that requires another degree of imagination. That requires technology. That does not require just iterating around the edges of what's happening today. So I invest in the intersection of technology and sciences. Now, if you combine that with if the sciences are biological sciences, you have drug discovery platforms, you have diagnostic platforms, you have digital healthcare platforms, and so on. If you go into physical sciences and technology, you have semiconductor chips, you have autonomy systems, or automation, you have future of manufacturing, new materials, and so on. If you go into computer sciences and intersection with technology, you have cutting edge machine learning AI, you have crypto, and so on and so forth, right? So the fields as we define it in VC can be very, very broad, but you have to really understand, where is the edge coming from? What is special and why would this scale? Building businesses is hard, any business. If you and I, with all the experience we might have, if we were to start a simple restaurant in San Francisco or Karachi, high likelihood we will probably fail. Second high likelihood, we'll probably work our asses off trying to just make one restaurant work, right? So it's not that you and I will work any less to open up a restaurant than to manage multi-hundred-million-dollar funds, okay? But I believe that if we have the capacity to scale that you and I might have and others who are listening to this have, then you might as well do something that matters. Might as well do something that matters to a broader set of people and to a broader set of consequences down the road. And that's where I think deep tech startups come in. So that's what I invest in. It's a very vast field. You and I don't think about it maybe very much, but most of the things we really enjoy in life are built around deep technology innovations. The kind of semiconductor technologies that enabled all of Silicon Valley to emerge, We are so used to touch screens and all that stuff. There's actually material science that went into building those touch screens. It wasn't just some code, right? The glasses that I'm wearing, the fact that yours are less reflecting than mine is because of chemistry that's going on over there. The fact that you and I are like, oh, we should take vitamin D every day is because of biological science is telling us what is missing in our bodies because of our lifestyles and what we need to do, and so on and so forth, right? Like, think about vaccines that the entire world went through this experiment in the last 3 years. Like, we took it for granted that, oh, yeah, vaccine, whatever, right? And suddenly we realized, holy shit, we need to have platforms to build vaccines. Not only platforms in the developed countries, but we need them in the developing countries, because guess what? Hand-me-downs arrive a bit later, right? Like, in some ways, we've got fortunate and lucky that that COVID did not spread as fast as it could have and wasn't as deadly as it could have. But if it was an Ebola-like virus, with the COVID-like transmissibility, would be pretty screwed in Pakistan, right? Like, we could lose 30% of our population. So, and now you think about climate change and you think about what is happening. How many lives did we lose just in the last few months in Pakistan? And this is going to keep happening. What is our solution to this? Nobody else is handing us anything, right? US gave us like $20-30 million, maybe $50 million. I was laughing when I saw that, because I said, my neighbor can probably give more money than that. Right? So the help is not coming from the outside. You have to look at yourself and you have to say, we got to build ourselves. That's why I think deep tech is important for every country and every major country, definitely in the world. And Pakistan is one of the most populous countries, because other people's solutions, even if they do apply to us, they're not going to be handed down to us right away. They're not going to be cheap. We don't know what we will have to sell of ourselves to get those things. And we don't know how much we will have to suffer before we're handed those things. We'll have to find our own solutions. And it's one thing if, 20 years ago, we should talk about, oh, we don't build our own cars or our own TVs when the only thing we really build is our own fans. It's another thing when it's a life and death problem. And I think we've seen real life in the last 2-3 years, life and death problems where other people couldn't care less, what your loss was.
Again, so enlightening, your responses, and I'm going to hold you to a response a little bit later in our conversation, which is what it takes to start, let's call it a more deep tech focused ecosystem in a place like Pakistan. But before that, I just want to ask, are there any differences in evaluating a business which is kind of deep tech, still early stage, across maybe the 5 metrics that you mentioned? Are there differences across like the risk return profile that they have, or the kind of exit opportunities, and like how does a VC think differently about deep tech versus tech business, or like technology versus tech businesses?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of differences, but the most fundamental one is the following. In most tech businesses, you don't question if it can be built, if it can be built. But the question usually is, will the dog eat the dog food? Right? I can build this website. Will anybody come to it? I can create this new EMR systems for hospitals. Will anybody want to use it? What will they pay for it? Right? I have this new chatting technology in Urdu, right? TikTok in Urdu. Will anybody want it? Anybody use it, right? Nobody will ever say, oh, you cannot build it because the tools don't exist. I mean, it's just coding, right? So, I mean, maybe you need to be a really good coder, or maybe a lot of really good coders, but the point is it can be done. So the fundamental questions become very much a product market fit question. So when most things, and I'm sure you invest in most of those things, you look for that product market fit. Oh, the early revenues, they have 3 clients, 3 customers, or they have 2 cities launched, or they have $1 million in ARR. What are those things really telling you? I mean, what they really are telling you is that the dog is starting to eat the dog food. I mean, that's the vernacular we use, right? And that's tech. In deep technology, often the problems are actually well understood, right? We have cancer and we got to solve cancer. Nobody's going to tell you, oh, if you build a cancer drug, I don't know if you can sell it to anybody. I mean, guess what? There will be people buying it. If you have cheap, clean water, people will buy it, right? If you have power that's cheaper and consistent, people will buy it. So it's not so much, you don't worry so much about the product market fit. What you really think about is, can it actually be done? And what are the kind of resources that be required to do it? Because you may be actually turning science fiction into science fact. And there may be a discontinuity in there that you're not seeing, or discontinuity in there that may be too wide for you to actually cross. So when we think about evaluating deep tech businesses, it's less about, is there a little bit of fraction that would help. Those things are fine and helpful and so on. But the most important thing is, what will this business look like if it actually works? And what are the resources that will be required to actually take it to that place? A lot of my companies that are worth sometimes billions of dollars have $0 in revenue, right? And you might say that it's irrelevant, but guess what? Most of biotech industry is that, right? Because you have stage-gated processes to bring drugs methodically through the process. And you don't have to take it all the way, because that last step might require you $2 billion to take it through a phase 3 clinical trial. But if you can bring it to phase 2, you've created tremendous value. And in fact, all biotechs used to take drugs to phase 2. And the new generation of now, not just biotech, but tech bio investments, what they're doing is they're saying, I have a platform that can consistently produce drugs that can get to phase 2 trials more successfully. Right. So you're starting to create a process by which you can create products that aid in real life. And evaluating those has a little bit more of a technical bent to it and a process bent to it than sort of, will the market need it?
And is it then fair to assume that, deep tech investments are riskier from the get-go, and so should require a higher return to be generated for the risk to be taken?
I don't think they're riskier. Look, most VCs suck. Most VCs invest in basic technology, the traditional software stuff, and they suck. So I don't think, hardware technologies or hard tech or deep tech is, the failure rate is any higher or something. I think there are two things to keep in mind, and now we're getting to a little bit of brass tacks of investing. One is, the kind of expertise that is required, not only in evaluating and investing in these businesses, but also in the teams that you need to build, is a little bit different. And many of those entities, they exist. You need scientists or PhDs or whatever, engineers, but many of them haven't done it at scale. So you and I can find VPs of sales all the time that have sold enterprise software to banks. But there are not that many VPs of sales you can easily find that have sold drugs into pharmaceutical companies. Like, that's not easy. I mean, meaning drug compounds into pharmaceutical companies. That's not easy. So you have to work harder to find those people, and it's a different kind of a network, and you have to be, flexible and have an access to that network. And then the second thing is that you have to think about scale a lot. Like, it has to be big, right? You don't build, when you're building an autonomous car, most people will focus on sort of the larger markets, the autonomous four-wheeled car or a truck or something. Most people will not focus on, some small application inside an airport in a caged facility. Now, this is where, within the deep tech ecosystem, you have some people who say, hey, the Bilals of the world with the larger funds are focused on building the next robo-taxis, but I'm going to build these, equipment that actually works inside, college campuses. And that's my niche, because I will go where the larger funds won't go, because he needs to build a 10, 20, $50 billion company. I will make great returns if somebody buys my company for $500 million. And that is entirely possible. And some of those ideas scale where you say, hey, I built this technology that kind of works here, but now I can take it in a bigger place. But all that is fine. I think all of these things are within the umbrella of solve real problems and build ecosystems that allow you to work on the harder parts of the problem that generate the most value. And then other things you leave to other people to do.
Is this then a luxury which only a few ecosystems in the world have, and only a few entrepreneurs and VCs can even attempt? Maybe Silicon Valley obviously being a clear example. Maybe if we look at cybersecurity, or Israel, and how there was such a concerted effort out there, or can it be done anywhere? I'm hinting at Pakistan, which is in its nascency altogether from a venture perspective, but can deep tech opportunities already?
The quick answer is yes, it can be anywhere, because 15 years ago, if I'd asked you the same thing about e-commerce companies, you would have said the same thing about Pakistan. We should be just opening up, hospitals, and, why are we doing this e-commerce business? We have other things to do, right? Or not even e-commerce, all kinds of businesses that we do in Pakistan now, right? Do we really need a 15-minute delivery at home? Like, I mean, is this really the biggest problem Pakistan has that we need to solve? Somebody would argue, yes. Why not? Right? And I would actually argue, why not? Why should anything be available to anyone else in the world, but not in Pakistan? Now, that said, it's not easy. So you have to have the right talent, right? You can't sit there and say, I'm going to create a quantum cryptography company when you don't have any physicists in the country, right? A real physicist. Like, so you've got issues, right? Like, you don't do a startup because somebody else is doing it. Just like don't create, Kareem because Uber's doing it. Create Kareem because you see a problem that's not being addressed, right? And I think that's, in Pakistan, there are certain problems that nobody else is going to address that is much needed, that if you do the real work on it, you can actually find interesting applications for it. Think about those incubators for kids in hospitals. Think about cheap MRI machines. Like, nobody else is going to build that. The US VCs are not building cheap MRI machines. Think about using ultrasound to do disease diagnostics, right? Like, using modern ultrasound and AI, you can actually do a lot more with ultrasound than just know the gender of the child, right? Like, why can't we do that in Pakistan? Ultrasounds are more easily available in Pakistan, right? Can we use that to do more, to find cancers, to help with disease prognosis, and then obviously helping with the cure as well? I mean, so there's a lot of interesting areas that are very interesting. We have 200 million plus people, okay, and then at least another billion people that look a lot like us. And so I think we have very interesting markets. We just have to figure out, does the business team have the talent to be able to do that? Having emotions and passions and wanting to solve a problem is not enough. You have to have the capability of doing that. And I think we have to systematically develop that capability. I will never forget, about this is now, I was still at MIT, so maybe like going 16, 17, 18 years ago, when I was invited by Syed Babar Ali Saab to go to LUMS and meet with the management committee there. And, they were starting to think about doing something other than just the business school. And when I went to that meeting, and you have some of the top businessmen in the country who were on their board sitting there, and they all wanted to build a technology institute, right? Why? Because, everything was technology. India was outsourcing, BPO or whatever it was. We need to have our own technology institute. We should teach everybody coding and whatever. And I remember sitting there and saying, guys, like, you are businessmen who are selling things. You're telling me your problem is you don't have things to sell. You become an import-export business, right? You're not building anything to sell to anybody. To build something, you need to have physics, chemistry, math, and all that taught. You don't have those schools. So what you should start is a school of science and engineering, not a school of technology. And you can imagine, in hindsight, today, a school of science and engineering exists at LUMS. It's probably one of the top schools, consistently sends people abroad to do PhDs and whatnot in top schools. But 15 to 18 years ago, whenever we were having this meeting, a school of technology made a lot more sense. Why don't we get more people and get them to write code, and we can beat Infosys at their work and Mahindra Tech at their work, and we can get more business for Pakistan, and look at Align Technologies that opened a call center. Maybe we can open more call centers, right? That was what made sense 18, 20 years ago. So today we sit here, we're like, dude, who's going to build a car in Pakistan? Like, screw that. Let's create some, e-commerce company that can, sell radios at home or whatever, right? But when you think back out to 20 years ago, that was unheard of, that we will produce our own PhDs in physics and chemistry that are competing with the PhDs from top institutions. But we're doing that in Pakistan now, right? The same thing happens now, that, that's what we need to do. SpaceX is an amazing company, but for probably 15 years, nobody cared about SpaceX. But there was somebody who said, we need to do that. Why should we rely on NASA? And why should we rely on Kazakhstan for doing launches? We should have our own launch company. And he built it. Right? America did not see a new car company for about 70 years, right? And this guy comes around and says, we need to build a car company, and I'm going to take an existing car company, take an existing car, a Lotus, I'm going to take the engine out, I'm going to put a motor in and batteries in, and probably only my rich friends are going to buy it, but so be it. I'm going to do it anyways. And that is now a car company whose market cap is larger than almost all other car companies combined, right? Yeah. So if you sit in Pakistan, why can't we do that? Now, I'm not suggesting it's easy. I'm also not saying I'm going to bring half of my fund and deploy it there, right? But I think it's very doable. The Reddy Laboratories in India is world-renowned and a very large business. Why can't we have an equivalent in Pakistan? Why can't we have our own laboratory testing equipment in Pakistan? Why can't we have eye testing equipment that's cheap and using machine learning AI? And with technology and software, so many things are becoming so cheap that so many things, software is eating the world, as Mark Andreessen says. It applies to us too in Pakistan. Software is eating the world. Let's use that. Let's eat up our world, because it kind of sucks, right? Our world sucks in Pakistan. Everything is a mess. Everything is difficult. Everything is hard to do. Whether you're a rich person or a poor person in Pakistan, you complain because life is tough. And a lot of this is self-inflicted wounds as a nation. But let's solve these problems, because nobody else is coming to solve it, right? I mean, look at countries around us. Look at Afghanistan. Nobody's coming to solve Afghanistan's problems for the next 2 decades. Nobody's solving the problems for Syria. Nobody's solving the problems for Libya. Okay? The world is fine letting these countries be just shitty places to be, right? Like, and nothing against them, but like the world has given up on them in some ways. We don't want to be that. We're Pakistanis. We don't want our country to be that way. So the only people who can solve our problems are us. And I can tell you, Saudis are not coming to solve our problems either, right? We have to do it ourselves. And those who are in Pakistan, it's incumbent upon them to do that, because guess what? You're in Pakistan and you're not going anywhere right now.
And this brings together two elements that I wanted to get your view on on a combined basis. So obviously we're talking, we have the benefit of having experience and been privileged really to have been to the institutions that we did and got the work experience that we did. And hindsight being 2020, it makes complete sense to have focused on some of these things way back when we were making our decisions. How does someone coming out of college make that decision right now? Like even in terms of is VC their thing? Do they want to be entrepreneurial? If they're becoming a VC, then why focus on copycat models and things that have been done, rather than really something that moves the needle and changes prospects of the country? And just to use one data point, I mean, we've already seen a bit of a transition, right? That, or at least this belief, this notion that entrepreneurship can be a viable career choice in Pakistan, which previously was not even the case. You were told become an engineer or doctor, and maybe law and economics then kind of came up. But the graduating batch of LUMs from this year, the MBAs, from what I've gathered, I don't think any joined a telco, none joined a traditional bank. Maybe a handful joined these MNCs like FMCG or other multinational companies, but a big majority joined a startup or opened their own startup or joined a VC. But how do they make that decision at that point? How do you know this line of work, this space is going to get the required infrastructure, is going to get the capital that will be needed, is going to get the support and the talent, and then persistent policy and the right regulatory framework to then make that difference and put Pakistan on a different kind of trajectory?
Yeah, there's so many things we can discuss here. The two important things I'd say is, one, play the long game. Everybody leaving college should be told, are you playing the long game? You and I, when we were in college, it felt like life is amazing and everything is before us. Now we look back, I'm 47 years old. I look back, I have more to think about what's in the past than what's in front, right? So life moves fast, play the long game. Second is, the building something is not for everyone. Building something new and creative. So I don't look down upon people who may choose to join a bank or a consulting firm or a telco or whatever. That's fine. People have, number one, they have risk tolerance, both, gut-wise, but also their family situations that they have to manage and deal with. So that's okay. The issue, however, is that for those of who have the flexibility and some amount of creativity and some amount of gut risk-taking capability, you have to think about, which path allows you to learn the fastest, which path allows you to grow the most. There's no guarantees in life, but at least, is it giving you the fuel? Is it giving you the opportunity to grow harder and faster? And I cannot for the life of me imagine how a large organization could ever promise you that. Large organizations, even larger companies in our own portfolio, are built to not fuck up what you've already built. Step one in your thing is, don't screw up what you've already got. Startups don't work like that. Startups are run hard, break things, move fast, right? So it allows people to have more flexibility. It allows people to grow more. It allows people to experiment more. So you should look for that. One of my favorite books, for 20 years now, is this book called Career Warfare. And career warfare, very simply stated, maybe should have been a blog post, but not a book. But what it really says is that, each of us live in about a 5-year time horizon at a time, right? We went through 5 years of middle school, elementary school, 5 years of secondary school, 5 years of college, 5 years of PhD. And then afterwards, when we enter the lifestyle, we're sort of trained into thinking in that chunks. And every 5 years, we see our growth curve rise and then start to plateau. And the important thing is that when you're starting to see that growth curve acceleration, the second derivative start to slow down, you should start thinking about, how do I get onto a next growth curve? Sometimes you can change positions within the same company and start doing that. And sometimes you have to switch context and get to a new company. Startups allow you to do that. There's 4 to 5 year vesting in every startup. It's like sort of done in a certain way. Why can't VCs all come together and say, you know what, we're going to have a 20-year vesting? But we could do that. It's not in Quran somewhere that it needs to be a 4-year vesting, right? But we came up with that because, you want to have the ability to grow and learn and grow. And then, at some point you will see that maybe I'm trying to flatten out, and some people will grow into the next role. So they join as engineers and they'll become, GMs or managers, or they'll become CTOs, or they'll become VPs, and some others won't. And they'll move on to the next job. Right? And maybe a slightly higher role, director of engineering at a different company that's an earlier stage company, but they were not good enough to be director of engineering at this company that's grown now. So, that scalability and finding ability to always remain on a high inflection curve is really important in a career. So I encourage young people to find places where they can figure that out. Being in a crappy startup around a crappy person that doesn't give you that opportunities is probably worse than being in a telco, right? But being surrounded by an amazing person, even if that startup fails, you will learn so much. Look at how many people have come out of Kareem to start companies, right? In Pakistan. And most of them I meet were not like senior VPs at Kareem. They're like engineer at Kareem, and I ran Faisalabad for Kareem, and and that's okay, because what it told them that, holy shit, I saw this grow. I was one guy in Faisalabad, and by the end of it, I was 200 people, and and I think that is what Pakistan really needs, in my opinion, that people who see that this could happen. It may not happen overnight. We're used to it in the US that things happen overnight, but it wasn't the case here either. People didn't become billionaires overnight. People used to build companies for a long time. Steve Jobs was at Apple forever. Bill Gates was forever. Michael Dell still is at Dell. Right? So these are not companies that you become a billionaire and leave. They're on a mission to do something bigger than just becoming rich. And I think the same thing applies to Pakistanis. You will get wealth along the way, but build something that is important. And it doesn't mean that, you need to have everything all at once, right? If I was to go back to Pakistan, I can't say, give me a high salary, give me all the capital I need, give me the best talent. I mean, nobody will do that even in the US. Why in Pakistan? You got to make your own resources work and play the long game.
And if one does apply that like logic, then and grass being always greener on the other side, then when one is kind of like deciding between the trade-off of like a more mature ecosystem where like more tools are going to be available, like what does it take to kind of like actually persist in and make that tougher decision? Like you're choosing a tougher journey ahead for yourself. Like how does one motivate?
I think very few people choose a tougher journey because they already know it's tough and they just feel masochistic and they're like, let me go inflict some pain on myself. Most people see the reward being higher, right? Like if you have somebody who died in your family of cancer that you loved very much, then curing cancer becomes an important thing to you. Until then, it's something that's like, yeah, there's cancer in the world, there's diabetes in the world, but there's a lot of things in the world. But at some point it becomes personal. At some point for somebody, it becomes personal that Pakistanis should not die of starvation. Pakistanis should not die because the flood came and just took them. Pakistanis should not die of basic diseases like diarrhea and tuberculosis. So they'll start working on it. For anybody sitting here, doesn't really register. Right? Like they can't really understand what it means that we don't have, proper housing in Pakistan for a lot of people in the villages, right? So at some point, the reward becomes very important to you, and the reward feels like, I need to do this. Oh my God, look at the success I can get. The potential of success is very high, and success as defined by you. The second thing is that increasingly, and let's not forget that, it is becoming easier and easier to build companies, right? capital is available. You and I are publicly available. Come talk to us. Tell us what you're working on. That was not the case 20, 30 years ago in Pakistan. Like, who would you go to say, hey, give me money? You had to know people who know people. You had to have a rich uncle or a rich, school friend or something. Now, that's not the case. You are publicly at conferences, giving your time just literally to meet people, right? The second is everything is happening in software. The decentralized networks, there's a friend of mine, Hemant Taneja, wrote this book that, if the 1960s were around centralization, it was around economies of scale, which we all learned in business schools or whatever growing up. This economy of unscale, and that's his book, where you can now do things at subscale that are profitable. You could design, engineer, manufacture, distribute, sell while sitting at your home. Right? You don't have to have a company with 100 engineers and doing everything. You can have a fully decentralized organization, even more so since COVID, but even structurally, there are now resources available that you can tap into other places to work with. So let's use that to our advantage. Now, I'm not suggesting that every problem can be solved right off the bat in Pakistan, but choose problems that are relevant to Pakistan, that the resources are available in Pakistan, that can be done. That there's no reason why we don't have our own motorcycles in Pakistan. I mean, for heaven's sakes, why do we not have them? What is the problem that we need to solve in mobility in Pakistan? And how can we solve those problems? Right? Like elderly care. How do we solve that problem? Energy, a massive use. There's, I have a company that's worth $4 billion that builds software to figure out where and how to put distributed energy on homes, buildings, and so on, right? So you can build a very large company and they don't touch a solar panel once. So I think it's possible. Like people in Pakistan, everybody went and got these UPS systems at home, right? I mean, every home I go to has a UPS system and they all suck. It's like, oh yeah, it gives me two hours. I'm like, why not 20 hours? Because what you really need in this country is 20 hours. Oh, then we have to go these lithium-ion batteries and then this happens and that happens. Oh, because somebody should go build it. Like, you don't have to be a lithium chemistry engineer to figure that out. Find the best batteries out there, find the best electronics out there, do proper programming instead of this home build stuff that you're selling. And I think you can have a real market to yourself. Again, I'm not trying to trivialize challenges. Look, doing anything in Pakistan, even paying your bill, when you're standing there with money, please take my money, is like a pain in the ass. So I'm not trivializing things in Pakistan, but as we all know, that those exactly the kind of situations is what presents opportunities. And the same thing here. No entrepreneur here builds a business where it's so easy to make money because everybody else is making money there. Entrepreneurs in the US are building businesses where it's a hard problem that nobody else has seen it, nobody else is doing it yet. Probably there's something hard to do. And if they can figure that out, then holy shit, they will have a N of one monopoly advantage there. That's where they build companies. Same thing applies to Pakistan.
We're running short on time as well, but I do have 2-3 questions of my own, and then a few questions that have been submitted. Through these very quickly. So the second now for you, when you have let's say apply a global lens on VC, and do we have to think?
Rabil, you just hung up for the last 10 seconds.
When we try to identify similar interesting areas. Now,
Rabil, you hung up. Yeah, I missed you for the last 10 seconds. You might have to repeat that.
Yeah, sorry. I think it might be a patchy internet connection on my side. So I was saying that was an interesting segue because I want to just pick your brain in terms of what you think is interesting now, from a VC perspective, both globally, and do we need to be thinking about it differently in Pakistan? Again, given all of the things that you said, but maybe if you want to preface that answer by first maybe sharing your view on what is happening right now in tech, the declined a little bit. So maybe if you can kind of provide a little bit of the context and then what you find exciting going forward.
I absolutely happy to talk about it. And I think I got most of your questions. So one is people are looking for new platforms. So we should understand that. There's a reason why Metaverse is looking for VR, AR, and people looking at large language models as a next-gen AI, and people looking for mobility, autonomous systems, broadly speaking, to bring automation into the world and improve efficiency. In fact, people, are having debates that are like, do we need more population or less population? Because do we want to increase efficiency, or do we want actually to not have, so almost like, Ludditism. So people are looking for new platforms, and a lot of VCs are looking at either base layer of platform, new semiconductor technology. Are we going to continue to go down to 2 nanometers and below, or do we need to have something else like a chiplet systems, all the way to autonomous systems? And is it human in the loop autonomous system, or is it 100% autonomous system? And what actually makes sense for scalability purposes? This next 10 years, I can almost be sure, is the decade of tech bio. We now have software truly meeting biology, and this is one of those areas where Pakistan can make a real dent. We have incredible biology education. We have incredible medical schools. We have computer science and data scientists, mathematicians. I think if you brought this together, there's some very, very interesting problems that could be solving. I mean, we don't even have to think about it only from a healthcare life sciences perspective. There's agricultural tech, there's there's livestock, that managing that and thinking about the future of that. And there's some very interesting solutions that can be built. People are building new kinds of feed for animals so they produce less methane. So it has global warming potential reduction. Right now, think about that, right? Like, why can't we do that in Pakistan? There's nothing, it's simple biochemistry that can be done in simpler labs, right? And it's a lot of field work, which is much cheaper to do in Pakistan than it is to do in the US. And the application is actually in agrarian economies, which look more like Pakistan than not. So I think there's very interesting types of things that can be done. And then there is this whole, viruses. People are using, obviously we know about COVID and everything associated with that, but people are using viruses as a way of bringing biotech medicines inside the bodies. Because one of the problems is, how do you take a biotech medicine inside the body to where it needs to be? So people are now using, we have a company called ERA, which was, which has been, came out of MIT, Feng Zhang's lab, which is really using effectively adenoviruses to deliver drugs inside the body. This is, if we had a virology institute in Pakistan and we were studying this could be a very interesting problem to solve in Pakistan. And then, another area is this whole world of crypto and Web3. And, I'm not a crypto bro, but I think if I look at it as distributed infrastructure, amazing things. If you take Web3 distributed infrastructure and then large language models emerging as, will it go centralized or decentralized? You have very interesting infrastructure problems emerging to be solved. And they can easily be worked on in Pakistan as well. So, this is not about building new silicon, but this is actually using those technologies to say, how can I solve interesting problems? So, there's no shortage of problems. You and I could sit there and probably come up with ideas for at least 20 startups in an hour. What often is missing is founders who play the long game. Like they see this, this is really interesting, but then they can't find the 0 to 1. And by the way, that's where I spend time. Like if I find an entrepreneur with a 0 to 1 mentality, that's what I want to invest in, because I can then help them get from 1 to 10 or 10 to 100. I'm better equipped to do that. 0 to 1 is where they're grappling and they're looking for support, but they have the tenacity to do that. And that's where VCs can be very helpful to these people, including in Pakistan. Because I'm sure you're meeting people who are really interesting, doing interesting things there, but they're probably not yet seeing the support from the investment community. So they get dejected, disheartened. And that's understandable, but that will change. You need to find more successes. And as you find more successes in your own portfolio, you will say, hey, now I feel a little bit emboldened to do a little bit more in these areas. And that needs to happen. Like, I think all these Seths in Pakistan, they need to say, man, you have so much money. You don't know what to do with that money besides, try to move it outside the country. Why don't you take a portion of it and invest in these things for the next generation of your own? And I think we will see that. We will see the young people who are children of these rich, feudal lords will be like, well, some of them will do whatever they've done in the past, but some of them will say, hey, I want to do something more with my money than just sit on money and enjoy it and living in Dubai, London, and Switzerland. And I think that's the early money that will get unlocked. The same thing happened here. The first money that came in was not tech VCs. The first money that came in was rich people who wanted to invest in breakthrough technology.
I loved your response because you were linking on, and again, just as a matter of like, playing the long game, as you said. But can I ask you the money question here as well? Given everything that you've said about Pakistan and the opportunity and the white space here, is it safe to assume funny? It doesn't necessarily need to be any particular sector, but as long as they tick the boxes or some of the boxes that you mentioned, like, have that maybe drive to go 0 to 1, are willing to play the long game, are like, again, driven, are thinking with the perspective of like, attracting the right talent, building the right teams, having the right approach. Is it fair to assume that Lux is open, or Bilal in his personal capacity is willing to give his time?
So the quick answer is yes. And look, we have proof of that, right? I've made one small investment in Pakistan, but I've made that investment not because I'm going to get rich making that investment. I've made that investment to learn about that particular part of the ecosystem because I think it's a very interesting one in Pakistan. We've made investments, several of them, and some large ones in Africa and in East Asia. And we're looking at South America. So I think Lux is starting to see the same thing that I'm talking about. Like, we're starting to see that not all of these problems need to originate and be solved in the West. We do think that some of the smartest people that we're seeing are people who have spent, just like yourself, by the way, have spent time in the West to understand what are the things that have made things successful. Look, I don't want to get philosophical, and this hour has been way more philosophical than I thought when I first signed up to do this. But look, I've been reading Syed Babar Ali's autobiography, right? And one of the things you learn about is, this guy was born in 20s and 30s and grew up and, was a teenager when Pakistan was getting formed. In fact, was in college in the UK. And you learn, why is it that we learned about all these people who were the leaders in Pakistan, also studied abroad and came back, right? Quaid-e-Azam was brought back from London, and Allama Iqbal was also in England and came back. And, and the reasoning was not that we didn't have our own, leaders in Pakistan. But these people brought in expertise on how to communicate, how to think strategically about what to do, and how to then fight for independence, not on the streets, but in boardrooms with people that they had to negotiate with. And they were imperfect in their own ways. And obviously, we created an imperfect country because we're still fighting for, freedom, for many parts of what should be Pakistan. But the point is that experience really taught them a lot. So I think I'm finding that conversations that I have with people that have spent a little bit of time, either in the US, the UK, or wherever else, where they have had scale, is very helpful, because little bit of nudge from me in the right direction then allows them to run hard, because then they know how to run hard. And so I'm absolutely looking for that. I'm absolutely looking for people who have, who own problems, not solutions. I have a blog post that I've been sitting on. I should probably just put it out, but own a problem. Right? Google owns the search problem. The algorithm is not what Google owns, right? Like, they have figured out how to find search, and they will keep figuring that out for you because they want to own the search problem, right? Amazon, besides the AWS business, owns the e-commerce retail problem, right? Like, so they have figured that out, and they will keep solving that. Walmart solved the logistics problem. Right? So you have to figure out what problem is it that you want to own and work on that. So the investment that I made in Pakistan, and I've not declared it, and I'm not going to talk much about it now, but they want to own that problem. You and I can disagree on exactly what the right solution might be and what solution might work or not, and there'll be some trial and error, but they want to own that problem. And I think that is what's needed in Pakistan. And some of the best companies I'm seeing in Pakistan is that don't build companies that are like, this for that in Pakistan. Because that I haven't seen too many of those be successful globally, or at least not for the long term. Maybe there's a moment in time, but this is when the economy is going through a depression. This is the best time to find companies that are like truly N-of-1 companies for that space.
Bilal, I truly feel like, in an hour, I get like at least a few days of learning when I'm having a conversation with you. So it's never to kind of like, turn the conversation off. But any parting advice or words for aspiring VCs or entrepreneurs? Again, like, we have people joining from all over the world, but like, with a proportion from Pakistan. What would you like to kind of like, end this with?
Yeah, two things. Number one is life is not easy. So it won't be easy for you either, especially if you're on a mission to solve some big problems. So if don't get used to the idea that I just have to pitch 5, 6, 7, 10 people and I should be able to get money. And if I don't get money, I should just move on. This idea is not fundable. You will probably have to pitch like 50 people. You'll have to kiss a lot of frogs. You're not trying to convince every single one of them because some of them just cannot be convinced. What you're trying to find is a few people that will believe in you. But that means meeting a lot of people. And that's okay. That's how the world works. Stop believing in stories that this guy didn't do anything, just met 3 people and then raised $50 million. And, why can't woe me that I can't do that? That's just a part of life. That is most founders' journey are like that. Some of the most successful people in my portfolio, with a few exceptions, were rejected so many times that it's not even laughable, right? But they eventually come through. In fact, companies that 5 years ago I would have said would be the biggest success stories in my portfolio are probably not. And companies that look like, I don't know, man, if this is gonna make it, are now public companies and very large companies. So, don't give up in that sense. The second thing is human resources is the biggest asset that Pakistan has.
Here's what I found.
And develop your own capabilities, in Pakistan, if you cannot find it from the outside. Like, there's no, the brain set is there, the number of people are there. If you're building a company that, let's assume you're Kareem, right? Just as an example, and you're starting to see, I'm using more and more machine learning, AI, and tools and whatnot. The question I would ask is, why are they not investing in not just ML technologies, but places where you can bring talent out, right? What is their partnership, and what are they doing to actually have the next gen machine learning models, the next gen ML ops, the next gen LLMs and training algorithms set up? Like, that I think is what Pakistanis need to do. So if you're even in a large company and not in a startup, that's how your mind should be thinking, that what resources can I generate to make something good happen. I encourage everybody to try and read Syed Babar Ali's autobiography. It came out a few years ago, but it's a story of a person I highly respect. Like, I think one of the person I probably respect most after my parents in Pakistan is Syed Babar Ali. And what I learned when I read that is your personal stories. But what I really learned is, man, there was nothing there in Pakistan in 1947. This guy had to build it all from scratch. He had to go find partnerships outside because nobody, he couldn't figure out how to package milk in Pakistan. He had to find somebody somewhere else and say, will you come to Pakistan? He had to use his personal charm to attract them to come to Pakistan just for a visit. Just come to enjoy Pakistan's villages. And they came and they fell in love and they said, fine, I'll give you my used equipment. And that's how packages got started. Okay? But that's what it takes. And I think it's in all of us. So the guys who come to US and they're looking for a $10 million check, and somebody says, I don't know, maybe I'll give you 100K. Take that 100K, right? Because what you're looking for is step building. And these are all little cement blocks that are going to help you along the way. There's no Messiah out there. You got to be your own Messiah.
Excellent messages. Thank you so much for a few of these over the years, and I hope I can have many more of these. But one question that came up in the chat was like, how can founders reach? Is LinkedIn the preferred method, or
LinkedIn has my work
other
email
way that you'd like to communicate?
LinkedIn has my work email. I'm also adding it to the chat. You can just email me. Email's already overloaded, so it doesn't matter if I get a few more.
I'm also really so that when we have opportunity to learn from individuals like yourself,
yeah, this is great. Look, I'm sorry I missed your last sentence because you got cut up, but I want to thank you for putting this together. Thank you for the patience with me. And thank you most importantly for everything you're doing in Pakistan. The rest of us are the yik-yakking, just talking. You're actually doing it. And it's really, really appreciated, obviously by all the Pakistanis who are in Pakistan, but also Pakistanis who are outside.
It takes a village. So whatever little role we can play. It was an absolute pleasure, Bilal. Thank you so much. And look forward to our next coffee catch up in California.
Absolutely. Look forward to it. Take care, brother. Thank you all.
Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.